Hello everyone, this is Maki Assad and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm honored to have Dr. Timothy Irwin as my guest to talk about the interview process of the residency application. Dr. Irwin got his medical degree from the Pennsylvania State University and currently is a PGY5 at the Harvard Plastic Surgery Program. Welcome Dr. Irwin to the channel.
Thanks for having me, Malky. I saw your YouTube channel. It looks great. Awesome resources for all the aspiring plastic surgeons out there.
Thank you so much. I would like to start by asking you about the preparation for the interview process. When residents receive their interviews and they know that they're going to interview at a certain program, what recommendations do you have for them to prepare for that interview?
Sure. So I think there's two parts of interview preparation that are particularly important. The first part is preparing to interview at a specific program. So if you know that you're going to be interviewing, say, at the Harvard Plastic Surgery Program, then you want to do a little bit of research on the program itself. I think there's a few different avenues that you can use to look at the programs. I think almost every program has a website that can give you some pretty useful information about the curriculum, about what residents are already there and what faculty members you work with as a resident in the program. They'll also give you an idea of what type of research and what type of other interests that the faculty and residents have. And those are good things to know about as well. They'll help you in the interview process because sometimes you can ask pretty good questions to somebody that's interviewing you about a specific topic that they might have an interest in or that they research, and that's always a good way to break the ice a little bit and let the interviewers know that you kind of know a little bit about them, just like they know a little bit about you.
Definitely.
So,
and I feel when they know that you have done some research about the program, it changes the course of the conversation.
Completely. I think if you come in there and you ask intelligent questions about either the program or people in it, then you're right. I think it entirely can change the course of the conversation. Now, if you come in and you ask questions like, "Oh, so tell me what kind of rotations do you do?" I mean that information can be easily looked up online. So you don't want to ask basic questions that may already be present on the website. And then in addition to the website, you can ask your mentors. You can ask other residents that had interviewed at those programs before that may be at your home program. And then I would say, lastly, you can look at social media and you can kind of see what they put on their own social media or what they put on or what their residents in their program put on their social media in terms of research and interest and stuff like that. So the second part of preparing for an interview, which I think is actually the most important, is knowing your application backwards and forwards. So not only knowing your application, but being able to sell yourself. So that's what you're doing in the interview process. You're trying to sell yourself and make every program think and believe that you are the best fit for their program. And so once you know a little bit about what each program has to offer, because you've done your research on them, then you can kind of see how you can fit into that program, and then highlight during that interview your strengths and how they will be applied into that type of program. I'll use a little anecdote for this. So here at the Harvard Plastic Surgery Program, we rotate at quite a few large tertiary quaternary centers, and we have a ton of faculty members. So in contrast, some programs may only have 6 to 10 faculty members who they operate with all the time and get to know really well. I have a ton of faculty members that I get to work with, and I know a lot of them really well, but it takes initiative on the resident part. So when I interviewed here, I made sure to give stories and to talk about how I had used initiative during my undergraduate studies and how that continued into medical school and so forth. So so I think that that's an important thing to think about as well.
This is a really great point, and it brings me to my second question, which is, as part of the preparation, you need to have an idea about the questions you might be asked about. Can you tell us a little bit about the potential questions that interviews might have during the interview?
Yeah, I think the biggest question that's asked at every interview is the "tell me about yourself" question. And everybody kind of makes fun of it, but I think it's a freebie for the applicant, because I basically am given the floor, or as the applicant, you're basically given the floor for about 2 to 3 minutes to tell the interviewers who you are, where you came from, and what you're all about. And so I didn't necessarily say the same thing each time. Again, I kind of had a general template that I followed, but I had a prepared answer to that question prior to my first interview. And basically, I wanted people to know kind of where I came from and what I was about, and kind of my core values and who I was as a person and what I was looking for in a program. And I think that that's probably the easiest thing to do, is to have a good answer for that. But, some people don't, and some people will kind of get caught off guard a little bit, but you may be asked that question 3 to 4 times at the same institution. Other questions that you will most definitely be asked about, anything on your CV or on your application is fair game. So if you have a ton of research publications, if you're somebody that took a research year off and you were very productive and you have, say, 20 to 30 publications, I would certainly, maybe there's one that you wrote like 5 or 6 years ago that you might not remember all the details on. I would brush up on some of those things, because I've certainly had people ask me about projects that weren't pertaining to plastic surgery and had been written a while ago. So, so I would know your own application backwards and forwards and be able to answer any questions quickly about your application. The other things, the other questions that I think people ask all the time are, so why do you want to come to our program? And so again, that goes in line with preparing and researching the program prior to coming. So you want to have an answer to that question. You want to know, like, why do you want to be at that particular program? Other questions people will ask is, why do you want to move here? I think people that ask those questions are usually not in like the major cities. They're kind of in the smaller cities or programs that are out in more rural areas. And if a medical student is at a in New York City and they're interviewing in the middle of central Pennsylvania, some people are like, oh, so you really want to come here? Tell me why you want to leave New York City. So I think that you have to be ready to answer those questions as well. And then I think other few questions that you'll want to know the answers to, or that I've been asked before, what's your favorite plastic surgery operation? Why do you want to be a plastic surgeon? Where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? And then what would be your ideal plastic surgery career? What would that look like? And so I think that those are all fair questions, and you just have to spend a little bit of time thinking about them. And and they're very individual. You know, there's not a right answer for any of those things, but I think that people just want to know that you have spent time thinking about that.
Awesome. I've heard from previous applicants that some people get questions regarding behavioral situations. What would you do if you had, for example, an angry resident or faculty or difficult patient? Can you give us an idea about these type of questions?
Sure. So I've never been asked a clinical question on the interviews. I think that most people aren't doing those anymore, but you're right. The behavioral interview questions, I have been asked quite a few times. I remember one of the questions that I was asked was more about, basically the ethics, or trying to decide between following the quote unquote rules of the hospital, or trying to decide against the safety of a patient. So, and again, I think that there's these are ethical gray areas, and sometimes they don't necessarily care about your exact answer. Obviously, they want to see that you're weighing the pros of following rules and protocol, and the pros of taking good care and of patients. But I think they kind of want to see more. They want to see more that you're thinking about the problem critically. You are responding in a non-emotional and a very streamlined process. And then they do want to just kind of weed out the people that have like absolutely, off the wall, ridiculous answers. So I think that's why a lot of interviewers ask those questions. And then, I would say there's usually always a question every few interviews or so about conflict resolution. And, you mentioned it, the conflict between residents, like an angry resident or an angry attending, or, what do you do if a resident calls you out, or you see a resident, one of your co-residents doing something inappropriate. And I think for me, the biggest thing is I always would try and I would say, and I always try to, resolve those conflicts interpersonally first and go directly to the person that they affect. Instead of, I think the wrong answer in those situations is saying like, oh, I'd write them up for a safety report and then I'd try and get them fired. I don't think that taking the over exaggerated steps is ever the right answer in those things. Again, I think they want to see that you're thinking critically about these, that you're caring about people as individuals, and that you aren't coming up with a crazy off the wall answer. So it comes up, and it is important. They want to find residents that are going to not cause problems, but help solve problems.
Definitely. So from looking at the NRMP data, you see that after being invited to an interview, the interview takes the top 3 ranks in the selection for the rank. So how can the applicants shine out or stand out during an interview if you just answer the questions? It's kind of harder to do that during the interview compared to a test where you get a higher score. So what are your recommendations regarding that?
Sure. So I think one of the easiest ways to stand out is to make sure that you are communicating your message and selling yourself with all of your answers to every question. And you're right, sometimes you're not going to get the perfect question to show what you have or to show what you've done. But I think that almost every question that interviewers ask, there's an opportunity for you to somehow weave it into your story. So before I went on interviews, I picked 5 or 7 bullet points about my application and about myself that I felt that I wanted to share. That's how I was going to sell my story. and I tried to weave those into pretty much any question that I was asked. And it takes a little bit of practice, but I think that with a little bit of practice and with a little bit of mentoring and feedback from people that are close to you and from people that have done this before, like plastic surgery residents or plastic surgery attendings, that you can be pretty successful in that. And I think that's how you stand out. I think trying to is delivering your message clear and concisely to the interviewers. And I would stay away from trying to like overtly name drop or overtly bring up experience you had out of nowhere. Like they ask you a behavioral question and you're like, well, the one time I was in Africa for 2 months taking care of sick kids, I would try and, weave it into and keep it relevant to the questions that they ask.
Perfect. The next question could be, what can hurt you during an interview? What are the things that students should avoid during the interview?
Yeah. So I would definitely avoid poor body language. I think sometimes people can either be too nervous or too relaxed. I think that there's a good in between there, but you definitely don't want to be sitting back in your chair with your legs crossed while you're in an interview, but you also certainly don't want to be tapping your legs and tapping your arms and kind of getting your nervous energy out there. I think being having a very professional posture and being relaxed is good. I think other things that can hurt you in terms of your answers is if you don't actually answer the question. Like I said before, it's great to try and sell yourself and sell your application. And talk about your application, but if you just kind of go off on a tangent and you don't actually answer the question that they ask, then they're gonna kind of write you off a little bit. The other thing that I would say would be to be careful about like confidence and arrogance. I would never give. I would never want to portray that in an interview. So if somebody asks you a question about, this is actually kind of relevant, but a lot of people will ask you, well, what about cosmetic surgery? Like, do you want to be a cosmetic surgeon? And some people find, for whatever reason, it's taboo to tell people on plastic surgery interviews that you want to be a cosmetic surgeon or something like that. I wouldn't give any hard answer like, oh no, like I don't want to be a plastic surgeon or a cosmetic surgeon. I don't know why anybody would want to be a plastic surgeon that focuses on cosmetic surgery. You never know who you're talking to, and you never want to give a polarizing answer. So I would always try and, for those, kind of give a middle ground answer.
Do you think any of the aspects we talked about will change during the virtual interview, especially that most programs will be conducting their interviews virtually this year?
Do I think that anything's going to change?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be very interesting this year. I myself am doing I'm applying for hand fellowship this year, so I will also be doing fellowship interviews virtually, which is going to be a ton of fun, as I'm sure all the medical students out there are feeling the same way right now. So I think that the big things that are going to change are that you're not going to be able to see the place and really experience the culture, which you normally get to do on the interviews. You get to go to the night before dinner, or you get to go to dinner the night after, and really get a good idea of the culture and who you're and who is in the program. so I think that it's going to be kind of interesting to see what different programs do to compensate for that. So I think that's the way that things might change. You know, people might have breakout rooms where you just go and talk with residents for, 20 minutes and ask any questions you have. But I don't think that it's really. I think that it's going to be pretty different this year in terms of getting a gauge on the culture and a gauge on like the hospital system and the city itself too. You know, you're not going to be able to visit these cities that you're going to be in, so that you may be in. So it's going to be kind of interesting. The one thing that I would say is that, and this is true for in-person interviews as well, but for the virtual interviews, I would treat the whole time you're on the Zoom conversation, I would treat it like you're being interviewed. So even if you're not in an interview room and you're just like in a breakout room and chatting with other applicants or chatting with other residents, I wouldn't necessarily just, I would be cognizant that somebody may always be listening. There might be a resident in the breakout room that you don't see on the grid or on the panel. So I would just be careful about those things.
Great points. My final question for today is, do you have any specific advice for international medical graduates applying to residency?
Sure. I mean, I think I'm not an international medical graduate myself. There are some in our program. And I think for international medical graduates, I would say the same things for interview tactics. I would say, know yourself and know your story and how you want to sell your story to the interviewers, and then know the programs and know what you can offer the programs and how you best fit into the programs, and then do the same thing. I think, to be honest, as an international medical graduate, once you have the interviews, that's more than half the battle. And then at least what we say here at Harvard Plastic Surgery is, if we're interviewing you, then we think that you're a resident, that you are the type of person that would be a good resident in our program. And now we're just trying to find the right fit, the right type of people for the program. So we don't interview anybody here that we don't think would be a good resident. And so, like I said, so if once you're in the interview process, I would just, stick to all the stuff that got you there. Know yourself, know the programs, and know how you're going to kind of fit into things.
Perfect. So that brings us to the end of our episode today. Dr. Irwin, do you have any additional thoughts on this topic?
I just wanted to thank you for reaching out and allowing me to be on the YouTube channel. Again, I think these are great topics and great talks, and I think you're helping out a lot of people, and not just this year, but probably years to come too. So,
thank you so much for your time. I know you're super busy, and taking the time to talk to us is a really great opportunity for students to learn from. So thank you everybody for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Subscribe to my channel and follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Malik Assad. Thank you again for watching, and see you in future videos.